The transport shuttle hummed through the void between stations, carrying its usual mix of interstellar travelers. Merchants from the Centauri colonies sat hunched over their data tablets, while miners from the asteroid belts dozed in their seats after long shifts. In the middle section, rows of worn synthetic leather chairs stretched from wall to wall, most occupied by beings of various species making their way through the galaxy's commercial arteries. Except for the seats around Kethera. The Valonian female sat perfectly still, her iridescent blue-green skin catching the shuttle's artificial lighting. Her large, dark eyes gazed out the porthole at the stars sliding past, but her shoulders carried the weight of familiar isolation. The empty seats around her formed a perfect circle of avoidance, as they had on every transport, every station, every public space she'd entered for the past 3 years. It wasn't her appearance that drove others away. The galaxy had grown accustomed to diversity after centuries of interspecies contact. Humans traveled alongside insectoid Thraxians, the crystalline Zephyrite clinked softly as they walked, and even the gaseous nebula dwellers had found ways to interact through their containment suits. No, it was something far more primitive that kept the seats empty. Her scent. To most species, Kethera's natural pheromones carried the sharp, acrid smell of decay mixed with sulfur. Her people had evolved on a world where volcanic activity was constant, where the air itself was thick with minerals that would be toxic to most other forms of life. What smelled like home to a Valonian registered as danger, disease, or death to nearly everyone else. She'd tried masking agents, neutralizing sprays, even temporary genetic suppressors, but nothing worked completely. The scent was as much a part of her biology as her heartbeat. So she traveled alone, worked alone, lived alone among the billions of beings that populated the galactic community. The shuttle jolted slightly as it adjusted course for the next station. A few passengers grumbled, but most barely noticed. Kethera continued her vigil at the window, watching the stars that had become her only constant companions. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" The voice startled her. She turned to see a human male, probably in his 30s by their species standards, holding a worn travel bag and gesturing to the seat directly beside her. His skin was weathered, his clothes practical but well-worn. Most remarkably, he was smiling. Kethera's translator device struggled with her surprise. "No, it is not taken. But you may not wish to. Mind if I sit down?" He was already settling into the chair, seemingly oblivious to the invisible barrier that had kept that space empty for hours. Long journey ahead to Kepler Station. Other passengers had begun to stare, some moving subtly away from the area. Kethera felt her skin flush darker with embarrassment. "Human, I must warn you that my species produces certain chemical signatures that others find unpleasant." The man paused in organizing his belongings and looked at her with genuine curiosity. Then he took a deliberate breath through his nose. Instead of the revulsion she expected, his expression softened into something that looked almost like nostalgia. "You know," he said quietly, "it reminds me of home." "Home?" Kethera's voice barely functioned. He nodded, settling back in his seat. "I grew up near the sulfur springs on Io Colony. My family worked the thermal plants there for generations. That smell, it meant safety, warmth, energy for our communities." He glanced at her with kind eyes. It meant home. For the first time in 3 years, Kethera felt tears form in her eyes. She had forgotten that somewhere in the vast galaxy, there might be someone for whom her very existence didn't represent something to be avoided. "I am Kethera," she said softly. "Marcus Webb," he replied, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Pleased to meet you, neighbor." As the shuttle continued its journey through the stars, the empty seats around them began to fill with other passengers, drawn not by acceptance of difference, but by the simple example of kindness bridging the gap between worlds.